that Gary? It is so stressful recording these podcasts at home. Anyway, it wouldn't be a podcast without a mention of Gary, so that is okay. Welcome to Supercharged by AI, a podcast by AI Portland. I'm Megan Otarte. I'm co-founder of AI Portland, partner at Cloud4. I'm joined, as always, by Nicole Moores, my AI Portland co-founder and product design manager at Driveway. Today, we're going to talk about how generative AI can be used for art. And we are joined by Julia Stoops. She's a visual artist and a UX UI designer who's currently the director of web and digital at Guard Communications. Welcome, Julia. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Megan and Nicole. It's just such a thrill to be here. I've been a huge fan of AI Portland for the last few months, and I've just loved every single event, and I just am so thrilled and just so grateful that you two have created this thing. You've just spun it out of thin air, and it's just this amazing community already. So I just feel like really flattered to be here. Thank you. Yeah.
We're super stoked to have you. And you for those who did not attend our Everyone is a Creative Director event or listen to our recap episode, Julia gave an amazing presentation there about how she's using generative AI in her artwork. And it was so cool and inspiring, Julia.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it was a great experience to be part of that because there were like two other people, and I think there was Elizabeth Goltz and then also Spark, and we all came at it from such different places and had such different things to say about it that it really I just felt like I learned a lot, and I felt like there was a really interesting energy in the audience too. And I think there's just so many questions. People have so many questions around this, and you could just spend hours and hours and hours thinking about it and talking about it, and you would never get to the bottom. And of course, it keeps changing, as we all acknowledge every time we see each other. It's like, it's changing so fast all the time. So yeah, that was pretty great, and it was a good opportunity for me to kind of like consolidate some of my thinking, because I have been going through an evolution myself in my own art practice. And having an opportunity to kind of like stop and reflect over the last few months and how my thinking about AI has changed and my use of AI has changed, to be able to like put that into a potted summary. Not that I've arrived anywhere, but it gave me an opportunity to kind of look at like where I've come in the last few months, and the things that that have been surprising to me, and the things that I've learned, and so on. So yeah, it was pretty perfect timing actually for me to be able to do that right then.
That's awesome, Julia. And I think that leads into sort of our first question with you is exactly that. Like, can you explain your creative process and how you incorporate AI into it so we can share that with our listeners?
Yeah. So I have been a visual artist for a long time, and I have a couple of degrees in visual art, and I used to teach at art colleges and so on. And it's been a part of my life in a really big way since I was in my teens. And my art practice, which the end results are works on paper. I call them paintings, but they're really like drawing, painting, collage, works on paper. They come through a process that is very experimental, in that I'm always doing things to get the results I get. I do things where I don't know what the outcome will be. So I'm always using processes where I can't fully control the outcome. And so I do what could be called a version of sort of automatic painting. I do painting using ink, paint flowing from a vessel that's acting like a pendulum, and so it creates these lissajous lines on the paper. And I do other kind of automatic painting. I'm using the surrealist term, automatic painting, using just allowing like inks and other fluids to flow naturally, according to gravity and the laws of physics and so on. And then I use collage as well, and I make these collages using shapes that I create digitally. So I create these digital shapes in Adobe Illustrator, these 3D shapes. So already the shapes are kind of like, they're odd, they're unusual, they don't really represent things that you see in the real world, or like in the everyday reality. So there's this otherworldly aspect to them. And I put all this stuff together. And so I'm creating these occasions for all of these things to come together, but I never know what the outcome will be. There's always this element of chaos that I play with, and I play with that edge of chaos. So when I started working with AI, and when I say started working, I just started like playing with AI, I just started experimenting with AI, back last November. It was fun. And at first I started doing it as a sort of humorous exercise. And I mentioned this in the Everyone as a Creative Director talk. I started out making these humorous parodies of like art historical classics in the Western art historical tradition. But I was always going for images of like women with cats. So, imagine a painting by Rembrandt of a queen with cats. Imagine a painting by Leonardo da Vinci of a queen with cats. Imagine a painting of, by Vermeer of a milkmaid with cats in her kitchen. And so just kind of using this theme and just playing with it as a way of sort of playing with my own culture. And I felt like playing with art historical classics was kind of, to me, it felt harmless. Like I wasn't hurting anybody. These people are so famous that no one would accidentally mistake anything that I do for like the real thing.
And so dead, right? That's
and so dead. Like they've been dead for a very, very, very long time. And so there'd be no one out there would be like, oh, a lost Michelangelo. Wow, look at that. It's full of cats. So there's a sense of like, it's my culture. I get to play with it. Here's some fun things. And just that whole like, revitalizing the female plus feminine in Western art history, like returning to images that, got left out. There's that whole idea of like what gets left out of history, right? So that was fun. And then, as I mentioned in that talk, I had my studio was out of commission. My studio that I have in my house was out of commission for a few weeks due to a flood. I have to fix the floor. And so I just turned to AI as like a way of like, this was my creative outlet. And I started experimenting more and more and more. And before I knew it, I was no longer creating jokes. I was creating things where I'm like, I'm going to start calling this art. I'm going to start calling this my art. And that was a really interesting line to cross because, like everyone who's thinking about this, I have so many questions in my head, like, what are the implications here? What are the implications for art, for artists, for how we understand images, for how we understand authorship, how we understand appropriation? And I don't feel like I have answers to that. I feel like I have answers to, or I have responses to some of the criticisms that come up about AI art. I feel like when people say it's made by a machine, you could say you were very comfortable with, say, digital photography, which is also made by a machine. And anyone who's done traditional darkroom photography, taking photographs in a fully manual SLR, exposing silver-coated film to light, and then making the image come out using baths of chemicals, like compared with that, digital photography is very much made by a machine. But the same, the artist is still involved in the process. The artist is still involved in setting up the occasion. The artist is still involved in making choices, even when they Photoshop it to high heaven. There's all of these choices that you make. There's all of this curating choices you make. There's the 100 images you reject for the one image that you keep, and so on. So we feel very comfortable with digital photography being art. But I feel like it's made by a machine in the way that AI is made by a machine. And I feel like the artist, as an artist myself, I remain in the process every step of the way like a digital photographer, remains in the process every step of the way.
Totally. Megan, do you think this is a good time for Julia to maybe bring up some work so that we can look at it, so that, we have sort of a visual.
Yeah, I love that, because we'll have this on video, but also for those of you that are only listening, me and Nicole are gonna do our best to describe.
Okay.
Or maybe Julia can describe it, but we'll do our best to try to hit both modes. And if you are listening, we will have links to Julia's work so you can go see it or catch us on YouTube.
All right. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love the cats.
So this is an example of like how I started out. A queen, I would have asked for, the prompt would have been something like a queen wearing green robes surrounded by cats in the style of Giotto. And this one, I think this was the style of Arnold Böcklin. I don't know how to say his name.
So these are weird, right? And really wonderful images.
Do you want me to slow down?
No, it's okay. I think so. Now you're showing another queen in a golden dress with two cats. I love the cats. The cats look real.
The cats do look real.
These ones especially, like those cats look like they are definitely chilling on her lap, and her dress is like going over the chair, and I would like to have a dress that is so voluminous.
I think they're weird in the sense that, like, you're used to seeing maybe classical artwork of this nature, but they don't have a million cats in them. So you're like, this is not like what I'm used to seeing, but also very, very familiar as well,
Oh, a sculpture this time.
Classical Greek marble sculpture.
Those cats are creepy. Those ones are creepy.
Yeah.
The cats are all marble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they would rip off your arms.
Yeah.
They do look like
too.
They do look like they're protecting her.
Yeah.
They're proportionally very large.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting sometimes, for all the like how the cats often look very real, there are times also where like there would be a cat and it would just be like the size of a hippopotamus or something. I was like, why did you do that? I mean, I love it, but yeah. And so this one is an interesting one. Occasionally you just get these giant glitches. So everything would look kind of like, oh, that's like a really nice image by Mary Cassatt. Wait, what the hell is going on with her hands?
Oh my gosh, wait. Okay, so I didn't even notice in this image, she's got 3 hands, which I actually didn't notice right away. I most noticed that the black and white cat was like not correctly proportioned or something. He's very long. And...
Oh, I looked at that as like half of a third cat.
Oh, okay. But on all this, I did not notice the most obvious thing, which is like there are 3 hands and then 2 hands are like melded together.
They're fused, yes. And the other hand has 6 fingers, and that's not even including the thumb. Yeah. So there's just like sometimes it would be like, whoa, that's so weird. And I just really enjoyed the weirdness, like the fact that something was so weird in the middle of something that looks so normal.
Yeah, your mind almost glosses over some of this stuff. Like Megan didn't see it, right? Because you just kind of like look at it and like your mind sort of fills in the wrongness.
Yes.
But I kind of wonder, so I'm not an artist by any stretch of the imagination. I am always completely I find the way that you, Julia, and the other presenters look at things to be very profound, because I just don't have that kind of brain. And I wonder, when you see this, like when I see this and I actually notice the weird hands, I am unsettled and I'm like, oh, it's wrong. But when you see this was somehow a spark of inspiration or something in you. Can you talk about that?
I think it's maybe not quite inspiration. It's not like I now feel inspired to try and make glitchy images with extra arms. But it's more like the fact that it happens occasionally and how it it's subversive. I guess that's what I enjoy. The fact that it's subversive, like, you know, I love art history, steeped in art history, you know, just because of like my background and so on. But at the same time, like, if there's something like this, it's just like it just adds to the joke. It just adds to the sense of like, we can't take this too seriously. And so I think there's just like I guess the cheekiness of it. And once again, because the artist is very dead and, you know, very revered, and there's nothing I'm doing here that would damage Mary Cassatt's reputation, you know. I just have this feeling of like, oh, that's kind of like, I don't even know what I'm quite reaching for, but just something like a little subversive, a little bit
mischievous,
like a little bit mischievous, a little bit. I almost want to say like a little bit punk or something. It's just like, it's just like I'm playing with this, but at the same time, you know, I can thumb my nose at it, you know.
Yeah,
like with affection.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see which other ones you've got. Yeah.
So this one.
Someone else describe this one.
So it's like, where would you like to be in 20 years' time?
Ooh. I mean, she does look happy.
Yeah. I included this one because one thing that I noticed as I was doing this was it's really hard to get AI to make images of older women. And, you know, you ask for women of certain ages and you get like, you know, women who look like they could be, you know, in their early 20s easily.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit hard to tell with that, but, you know. And so I noticed, like, I'd ask for, like, you know, a 30-year-old, a 40-year-old, a 50-year-old. And, like, I kept getting these young women. And then it was only when I started asking for, like, 65-year-old, then I started to get, like, really very elderly women. And, like, it would just sort of shoot forward to, you know, women who looked like they were 85 or something. I mean, this woman doesn't look like she's 85. So I liked her because she was, like, she does look older. You know, she could be 65. And it was just rare to get an image like that because, it's just sort of that whole question of like how women get depicted by culture.
Right.
I was
going to say,
women are depicted within like the
we don't
language,
exist.
the learning models. Yeah.
Like women of a certain 45 to 60 range.
The invisible group.
Don't exist.
Yes.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
This image, this is in the style of Rembrandt. Is
that Rembrandt? Yeah. And actually using Rembrandt in the prompt was a way to get older women. And I think because he did paint women who weren't just like gorgeous and young and super smooth and so on. So I guess there's like, you know, the language model has something to grab onto there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So Rembrandt, this is a true cat lady, right?
She's a true cat lady, yes.
I mean, there's at least 20 cats, and somehow she's holding a significant portion of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're pretty chill. Like they're just all hanging out together, like just jumbled on top of each other. And yeah.
But she's oddly in some sort of a church or a castle.
Yeah. It's a very almost dark and foreboding structure behind her. Some sort of vast space.
She looks happy.
Yeah.
That's great.
So I think that's all I have in that collection. Do you want to see another collection? Okay, I'm going to have to.
Yeah, so that was sort of what got you started doing with AI initially. And I love it. Also, I do like cats, so it sort of fits right in for me.
I love the idea of sort of using something that's a little more lighthearted, jokey, to sort of dip your toe into the world of sort of generative art and really sort of whet the appetite for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it was certainly my way in, and I wasn't even expecting to do that. Okay, so this next collection, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how impressed I am with how Midjourney at this point is what I was using pretty much all the time. Handles like place and space and light, and also blends, because when I started using blends in Midjourney, that's when I felt like I had a breakthrough, and images started to feel like, oh, this is mine, in that it's really unique. It's didn't come from a prompt. It came from other images being kind of mushed together. And maybe some of those did originally come from prompts, but some of them might be my own. So this is an image from a photo I took on Mount Tabor, just like walking up Mount Tabor on a misty day. And then I blended it with an image that I had made. And again, it was like a sort of Rembrandt castle. It was full of cats. And so it's just sort of put this kind of castle-like structure in there. And you can see, like, it's just like distributed the cats like evenly along the path for some reason. Like, it just does stuff like, okay. And I just thought it was like really fascinating. It's like an alternative universe of Mount Tabor. Like if you went through a portal and Mount Tabor would look like this.
It definitely evokes Mount Tabor for sure.
Yeah.
So the blend, I haven't used Midjourney like that. So a blend is just you give it more than one source image and ask it to do its thing.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And sometimes it makes like just really weird choices about what it prioritizes. And sometimes it puts things together in ways that make me go, wow, I never would have thought of that. So let's see what else I've got here. Continuing with the natural environment theme. So this is from a photo I took on the coast, the Oregon coast, and I blended it with an image I made in Midjourney of, just this abstract shape. And it totally looks like it could be some kind of marine
or a shell of
artifact.
some sort.
Yeah.
Or an alien.
It's huge, yeah.
An alien.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah.
But also the sunniest day I've ever seen on the Oregon coast.
But I was so impressed with how it like embedded it in the sand, and even has like sand sort of like crusted around the bottom of it. It's like it understands a shape that was very abstract and just isolated on a white background in the original, and it's put it in this place, and it understands enough about the physics of the place to make it look like they actually do exist together.
I could look at this for a really long time. Like there's just something about it that's really compelling. So this shape looks like a very giant, maybe a shell on the beach, and the colors are appropriate too.
Mm-hmm.
It almost
really
looks like
soft
coral.
pastels. Yeah.
Like
like
coral
a coral
structure.
like almost like that sort of ripple. All the edges are rippled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. That's really interesting. And when you look at this, when you look at this picture, Julia, do you feel like this is something I created? Like, what's that sense of ownership on something like this,
Yeah, I do. I feel like I created it in quite a few ways. In that I made the original photo of the coast, and it's not an original photo in that it probably looks like a billion other pictures that people have taken on the coast, but it was by me, my eye looking through my phone, lens or whatever. And then I created the shape in Midjourney, and then I put them together. And I feel like the process doesn't feel too much different from when I create shapes in Adobe Illustrator and I cut them out and I collage them onto my paintings.
Yeah. I can see that.
I keep reaching for a feeling of like, oh, that feels wrong, or that feels like cheating, or that feels, and I don't find it. Yeah.
Interesting. Do you think because your sort of original form of art is very serendipitous, that you leave a lot up to sort of like chance as you're working through the process. Do you think that might be how it's maybe easier for you versus some artists to sort of relinquish control and sort of be able to play with the outputs that you get out of AI?
Yeah, I think so. I think I feel so comfortable with that. And I think artists, I do know artists who are very, very, very much their process is one where they have a goal and an outcome in mind, and then they do a lot of labor to get there, and they'll achieve fantastic results. I really admire their work, whether it's like, realist or not, but like they have this labor intensive process that involves like a lot of skill that they've built up over many years to be able to, create an image of a person that looks almost photorealistic or something using paint or whatever. And so it seems like people who work in that way I'm noticing, in social media and stuff, are having the hardest time with AI in terms of feeling like it's a threat. And I can see how that would feel, if you just spent your life building up skills so that you could make certain kinds of paintings. And then suddenly someone is making something that looks similar, and they're just doing it in an evening. That would seem threatening. But the thing I think is like never going to be a threat is that the painting that the person might make is a physical painting that exists in space and time in a way that a digital image doesn't. The painting can be sold. It can be, hung up. It can be admired as an object. And yes, you could print out a digital image and you could stick it on a board or a piece of metal or something and hang it up. But it really isn't the same. It's not, kind of harking back to Walter Benjamin. He wrote that famous essay, The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, like in the 30s or something, like what mechanical reproduction was doing to the idea of art and authenticity and so on. He was already asking questions like that back then. Of course, AI would have just blown his mind, I'm sure. But the original artwork still has this aura. It still has this thingness that the reproduction cannot have. And I think the thingness is always going to be important. And I think the thingness of the physical artworks that people paint laboriously are going to be still of value. And I think part of the problem is like we see a lot of the stuff on social media. So, something I make is like the same size and the same sort of feeling on a phone view as something that someone has painted. And so it seems to like even it out. But in reality, they're not actually.
It's not the same at all.
Same. Yeah. There's still something about the physical painting that's always going to be more and different.
The Thingness, coined by Julia.
Supercharged. I'm so eloquent.
We have this same sort of concept if you think about like first edition books or books that are signed by authors. You know what I mean? That adds that sort of like just stamp of like artwork or thingness.
Something specialness, uniqueness, like it still exists. I mean, you talk about books. Yeah, like I read some books on my Kindle, but I still will go get the first edition of Fourth Wing when it comes out or whatever, right? Or especially the one that has the dragons on the pages, because you can't get that on your Kindle. It still exists.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us about this one we're looking at here. We've definitely gotten into more surreal art here.
Yeah. And as I was doing more and more work, I noticed that various themes were appearing. And so a big part of my efforts these days is like sorting through all the images I make and sorting them into buckets, because in Midjourney, I'm up to like 16,000 images. It's kind of bonkers.
Wow.
So one of the themes that I repeat occasionally is like alchemical symbols. And so this would have been a blend of like some kind of prompt around like a blue sphere with wings. But then I think I put in perhaps like a photo of an Oregon landscape that had like kind of mesas and like distance and so on. So I really enjoy making images like this, because they're the kind of thing that it's not like they don't exist in the art historical canon, but they're kind of rare and you don't come across them too much. And so I really like being able to just create something that it would have been really fun to see this in a museum one day. I mean, if that had been possible. Again, that sense of like kind of filling in the art historical canon with things that I would have liked to have seen in it. Let's see if I have anything else here. Oh yeah, here's the Vatican, and it looks like they forgot to feed the cats again at the Vatican. Just really, again, kind of having fun. It's like, what would it be like if the Vatican was just full of cats? And I don't really know if this is like a one-to-one match of the Vatican. Like I haven't like looked at side by side, but it's Vatican-like, Vatican-esque. So just how Midjourney deals with place, how it deals with like light and form. This one is kind of getting a little bit more into that sort of surreal space of like, it's a place, but it doesn't look quite realistic. There's something stylized about it. And another theme that I work with quite a bit is a certain style of shape that's been inspired by a German, I think he was German or maybe it was Austrian naturalist called Ernst Haeckel. And he just drew lots and lots of pictures of like plankton and leaves and flowers and, all kinds of natural forms. Yeah. And he kind of like took liberties a little bit. He wasn't considered like a sort of true scientific illustrator, because he did tend to idealize the things that he drew, which doesn't bother me a bit. And so this would have been a blend of like, something. Actually, I think if I use his name in prompts, I get these kinds of images, because he's pretty well known and, from like last century or something.
I think this would be a fun one for Megan and I to try to describe for listeners.
Okay, you go.
It oh my gosh. Looks like you're at the edge of some body of water, a lake or an ocean or a sea. There's many shapes sort of like floating around. Some of them look like sea urchins or puffer fish. They're very organic, but also kind of abstract. Some of them do look like they're natural, like growing things or plants. But they don't look like any living thing, like actual living thing I've ever seen.
Or imagine you go into like a party and someone has hung all these really cool things from the ceiling. Like those like puffer things you can like hang for your decor. Like this is the ultimate selfie station. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, sure.
They're pretty spiky though. Like, you know, don't step backwards into the selfie station.
Don't get too close. No, I think Nicole absolutely nailed it. There is something oddly unsettling about some of the shapes. I don't know what it is. That there's a thing in the bottom right that like looks like ribs, or also some sort of animal.
I could look at this all day though. You know
so
what
many
I mean?
Things to look at. Yeah. Julia, what do you do with these images now? Oh, that one's cool.
Yeah. I should just show you a couple more. This was one of my favorite like series. These things happen in series because you just like get lots of images and then you do lots of variations and so on. And And this was, again, using the Ernst Haeckel idea as a prompt. But you can see like the aesthetics of this is so much different from this one, which is like dry and spiky and kind
almost
of like
muted
colors. Whereas these are like glassy
vibrant.
and kind of almost like luscious looking. And
they look like those what's the word for the like sea animals?
Anemone.
But they like light up. The like
the phosphorescent.
Yes,
Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah.
I think that some people might take offense at like you saying you're using this artist as, a prompt, but in my mind, it's the same thing as if you painted this and you're like, I use this artist as inspiration.
Exactly. Yeah. And once again, no one would ever misidentify these as like an actual Ernst Haeckel. Like if you look at his illustrations, they don't look like this and they don't look like, they don't look like this.
Right.
They look different from both of these. And in terms of like stylistically, they're still full of like wondrous shapes or arranged in a sort of, very organized manner. There's a way that he arranges things so that there's, they just spread out across the page in this very organized manner. But yeah, no one would look at this and be like, oh, that's an Ernst Haeckel. It's like, not his style. Yeah. And yeah, if I painted this and I was inspired by Ernst Haeckel, people wouldn't have a problem with that for sure. Yeah. Because that's considered that's an appropriate use of inspiration. Yeah. But anyway, back to your question about what I'm doing with these. I just want to get to the end of this series. I can't remember what I put in here. Again, another woman with cats, but I do have this thing about like ancient Greek.
Julia, do you have cats?
I have 2. Okay. I don't have as many as these ladies do.
I just thought it would be very interesting if you did not.
Right.
Like, actually, no, I hate cats. Like,
right.
I feel like if I did the same sort of, I was inspired, it would be French bulldogs.
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
Would be
you can.
Gary.
Mm-hmm.
Just create a Midjourney account, French bulldogs, go for it. There's room. There's room for us all. I just wanted to have a little bit of a series about like how Midjourney, just approaches space and light and so on. I just find it's really quite magnificent. Well, there's another one. I guess I have quite a few in this series. And I'm going to come back to your question in just a minute.
Yeah, no worries.
But yeah, these mushroomy things, boy, this was an interesting like rabbit hole. No pun intended that I went down with these mushroomy,
drippy
sort of sci-fi. It took me into this kind of almost sci-fi space, which I wasn't expecting. But to get back to your question about what I'm doing, okay, so I'm doing 2 kinds of things. First of all, I want to show you images of. I have so many things overlapping. Okay, this is the one I want to show you next. So yeah, there's 2 ways that I'm starting to incorporate this with my own artwork. And one way is to upload my own artwork into Midjourney and blend it with other things. So here's an example. So this is one of my, and I don't know what, I keep wanting to call them brick and mortar paintings, but that's just like the weirdest thing because like, they're not like a brick
physical painting or something.
Paintings, yeah, they're on paper. One of my physical paintings, and it's like, how big is it? I don't know, like 20 by 28 or something inches. And so it's made the way that I've been making paintings for quite some time with like layers of these lines and these ink washes and then digital collage on top of that. So the color, the orange and pink horns, and then the ribbons around them, and the wireframe shape, those are all made in Illustrator and collaged on top. So I fed that into Midjourney, and I mixed it with this one, which is one of those mushroomy sci-fi things, and it gave me that. And I thought, that's really pretty cool.
Yeah, you can see the influences from both, right? You can see the geometric shapes, but you can also see the more organic sort of mushroomy sort of growthy things.
The egg shape is repeated, especially in this one. That like in the center is like an egg-shaped orb that seems to be repeated from your original art or inspired from your physical art.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if it's the lighting that gives it kind of like a spooky sort of a little bit of a darkness, but also it's not dark, but it gives you sort of just like this sort of feeling.
Yeah. Oh.
Oops. Yeah, like there's like a lot of there's a lot of depth way back in the darkness. You can't see all the way into it. Yeah. Yeah. So here's another image, another work on paper, and this one's pretty big. It's like 50 inches by 38 or something. And again, it's ink washes and the lines, and then these shapes are collaged on top. So I combined that with this image I made in Midjourney, and which looks like a romantic period painting of, a castle built into rock in a cavern with like an ocean around it. It's very sort of romantic and mythological looking. Blended those together, and it came up with something really quite different from both of those. But it's kept these kind of balloon-like or vessel-like shapes, and it's kept the sense of like atmosphere.
Yeah. Yeah, these look like they're in a cave as well, right? And it has blended the two styles together in an interesting way where it hasn't like gone too far in either direction, but somehow it works.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always the surprise. It's like, oh, that works. I mean, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it just does something really ugly. But the majority, it works enough times that I just want to keep trying,
Right.
I think if it did ugly things or things that just felt like really disturbing too many times, I wouldn't keep working with it.
Right.
Here's another paper piece. And it's, as you can see, pretty abstract. Like it's really relying on abstract shapes, like a lot of concentric circles, these sort of golden orange rings that are tumbling around at the top.
So this is your artwork.
This is my artwork. This is the
artwork that you physically produced.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
Wondering if you could speak to your feelings about putting your own artwork into Midjourney and sort of releasing it into the large language model.
Yeah. It feels like again, I keep reaching for a sense of being disturbed by that, and I'm not, and it kind of feels like I'm pouring, like a little thimbleful of, I don't know, some liqueur into an ocean.
Right.
There's just a sense of like it's I'm putting it in there for my own use. There really isn't any data attached to it of like, this is a painting by Julia Stoops. It's, the file name is usually the file name for these things for me is just like the name of the piece and the dimensions, just so I can keep track of that. So yeah, it just feels insignificant, to be honest. I feel like it's like in some tiny little corner and it's going to have no impact other than my use of it.
Yeah. I think that's one of the complaints you hear from artists though, right? Like I don't want my intellectual property or my, creative work to be used
Mm-hmm.
potentially like the likeness of it
Mm-hmm.
to show up in these things. So it's interesting that your perception of that it really doesn't matter,
I just wonder, like, I know we talk about AI stuff a lot, and it comes down to a question of scale, right? Because the question I'm about to ask is, like, how is that different than, like, you show your paintings to people and you put them on the internet, presumably. You probably put them on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wonder where that line is, of like, well, it's okay to put it on the internet, but it's not okay to give it to Midjourney. And really what the difference
Mm-hmm.
is, because I don't know. I feel like every time we do something, at least on the web and design, the first thing we do is go look at what everyone else has done to solve that problem and literally take screenshots of every other place on the internet that's doing this type of a form. And then use that as like, okay, these things might work, and you make your own thing based on that. So it's just like the mechanized version of that is a bridge too far for some people, like, and the scale of it is so big. And I don't know, like, I know, kind of like you are sort of grasping with trying to figure out, okay, where is that line?
Mm-hmm.
And what is the actual place where I'm like, this is okay and this is not okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm having a hard time finding it, I guess.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time finding it too. I mean, I know that there are Pinterest boards with my name on them. Like people have scraped my art off my website, off like art magazine review website, whatever. And to my surprise, it's like, the Julia Stoops Pinterest. I mean, I'm not saying there's like a lot, but I have found that other people have like collected images of mine in that way. And that feels more, I mean, it doesn't feel like violating that I did anything about it. I was like, oh, that's a little odd. At least they put my name on it. But that feels more like someone's actually like taking my stuff and then putting it, like curating it in a way and just presenting it. And that feels like a little bit more intrusive than me putting these into Midjourney with not even my name attached to them. Then my name is not in the file name. And to me, it just feels like, I don't know, I feel like if I was an illustrator who was very famous for illustrating in a very certain style, and I was still alive and that was my livelihood, I can see how if someone in that position was seeing their own style being imitated on Midjourney, I can see how that would be problematic.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. But I feel like what I do is so far away from that. It feels like the issue doesn't touch me personally.
Yeah, I think that's fair. There are certain types of art that these models do much better and more quickly than other types. So like there are things that are more affected than others. I think illustration is a great example of that.
Yeah.
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 Ooh,
yeah.
That's tough. It's tough. It's hard.
So anyway, I put in this, I combined it with this, which I made in Midjourney. And as you can probably guess by now, that was like some prompt that involves Ernst Haeckel. You can start to recognize these sort of gluey little shapes and amoeba things and so on. And then I came up with these, which I really find quite pleasant. They're like soothing to look at.
They kind of look like amoebas or maybe even like cells of the body. There's something really organic to them and flowy.
That looks like a shrimp. Yeah, and I think the color palette is soothing in these too.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Here's another painting, and this one you can really see. So this is a painting on paper, and you can really see the ink colors, how they flow down. So combine that one with this one, which is part of that sort of mushroomy sci-fi series, and got these, which I thought were kind of interesting. Just a lot of like dynamic energy.
Is it weird that I almost see a face in that one? Ooh.
I tell you, I have to work hard at not having faces appear. Midjourney is just like, oh, you need a face here. Like, no, I do not. And it's always so like funny. A beautiful young woman, you know?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, I can now that you say it, I can see how, like, if I kept iterating on this one, I bet it would start showing me faces. Yeah.
That's cool.
Kind of in the reverse order, I am making things in Midjourney and then collaging them back onto pieces that I'm making, physical pieces, making on paper. So here's an example of one of those. And I haven't done a lot of these just because it takes like a lot of working out and kind of like reverse planning and so on. And so it's a lot more labor intensive to work this way. So here's one, and these brush marks were on the paper, and then this shape that I don't know if can you see my cursor moving?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So this shape here was made in Midjourney. I'll give you another one. So there's another one. Again, these kind of like lines and squiggles were painted on the paper, and then this kind of glassy shape with these protuberances and the shadow that it's casting were done in Midjourney. These concentric circles at the bottom, that was an Adobe Illustrator. Oh, and at the top too, an Adobe Illustrator thing collaged on there.
So that's cool, right? Because you are kind of going back to how you originally do art, right?
Yeah.
You're taking it back into your sort of, lack of a better word, native process.
Yes. So that's really interesting because I've always done these shapes in Adobe Illustrator, but then it's kind of a limited program. Adobe's 3D feature has limitations, and there are limitations that I've really enjoyed playing within. But at the same time, being able to make stuff in Midjourney and pop it into paintings is like a whole nother. It just is like taking my mind to another level with this collage work that I'm doing.
It's really cool. I love to see you basically adding a new tool to your toolbox.
Yeah.
Evolution.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, like, you know, seeing your artwork before, seeing the stuff you're doing in Midjourney, like, this is very different than it's different, but it's the same. You can see the sort of your influence in your process here, but they're very much different. You know, they're very unique.
It does feel different. It does. And I feel like this is the newest thing for me, and I haven't quite wrapped my head around where I want to go with it, but I can also see how I could work this way and I could go much larger. I mean, I'm limited in certain ways by, you know, the size of my printer and so on, but there's ways to piece things together. And I have worked really quite large in the past, and I haven't done that for a few years. And I feel like I'm going to be ready to go back to working large. When I say large, like, you know, 7 feet wide or something.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can just imagine like walking up to a giant, you know, piece with this art on it, and how cool that would be to experience.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
I can't wait to be invited to your opening of your 7 foot wide, whatever.
My 7 foot wide something.
Something.
Yeah. I need a venue. Yeah.
I promise not to see any faces in it. I think Nicole, do you have other questions for Julia?
No, I think we covered all the questions pretty organically.
Yeah, I love that.
I was curious about your UI UX work, but maybe that's a different conversation that you and I can have offline, mostly because I'm just curious if you are, since that's my wheelhouse. And but
I would love to chat about that.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Well, thank you, Julia, again for being so generous with your time. And I'm excited for other folks who maybe couldn't make the event to be able to see some of the cool stuff that you've done.
Well, thank you. Yeah,
I think a really interesting point of view.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you again for listening to this episode of Supercharged by AI. Subscribe to get all the latest episodes and check us out at aipdx.info for more information.